Hello, welcome back to the channel. So this is another video on my Rivals set of videos. Rivals, the card game from Renegade, looking at Vampire Masquerade. So today is the Malkavian playbook. So I'm going to take you through the Malkavian cards in detail, talking about some of the key things that you might want to think about when building a deck. And this channel isn't really about the cards in the card game, but I play Malkavian loads, and it's a deck I have the most handle on. Certainly I'm not a generalist when it comes to card games. I couldn't say do this for every clan in the game at the moment, but as I gain knowledge of a clan, I'll do these videos. And the other thing about whilst I've been playing the Malkavians, and I appreciate that it's a growing meta in Glasgow at the moment, they seem to be doing rather well. So I thought I'd post my thoughts about the Malkavians. The clan Malkavian in the World of Darkness is almost playing a different game to all the other clans, and certainly I have been embracing that with my use of conspiracies and just having enough unexpected things in my deck to cause a few surprises. So core strategy is conspiracies. Do use a load of conspiracies. So basically, when we're looking at the key Malkavian pieces, the governor is when you're playing a conspiracy, you're going to be drawing a card. The madhouse is a haven that could almost have been built for conspiracies, adding prestige to a face-on card you control. The end is nigh, conspiracy one, building up prestige and agenda points when you play conspiracies. And when we come to it, another key piece is velvet, so you're gaining prestige. So I think the first thing to do is start talking about conspiracies with Clan Malkavian. Now, one of the things I have found is conspiracies work, you need an action to play it. In case you don't know, conspiracy, take an action to play it, you put one prestige on it, you can then put extra prestige on it each turn. You can when it hits the target prestige totally, you're able to trigger it. You can also invite other people to join in with the conspiracy. However, this means you won't be able to target them. What I have found with conspiracy decks is you are going to use a lot of actions setting up these conspiracies. One of the things I'd quite like to see is some sort of action compression for conspiracies. I see Gangrel decks, Nosferatu decks being able to do all sorts of cool stuff with animals, with their actions coming back, and Thin Blood with their Thin Blood Alchemy. And I just wish perhaps there was something that could help compress actions for conspiracies. But anyway, let us look at the conspiracies. So at the moment, there are 6 conspiracies in the game, as you can see. Malkavian specific 1 and five others. So one that's going to attack opponent's agenda points, one that is going to compress your opponent's action terms, one which can get rid of ongoing effects, one which can force an opponent to discard some cards, one which steals prestige from an enemy, and one which taps out your opponents. So my experiences with them, not really use Lost Glory too much. My decks do tend to be about draining out opponents' prestige, and I can generally do that before they hit 13 agenda. Out of Time, really good on one-on-one games. Anything that reduces your opponent's actions is good. Not really thought it's that powerful in multiplayer game. Burning Down the House, a lot of my opponents don't use ongoing effects, so it's always felt a bit redundant in my hand whenever I've got it. But with redundant cards that you can't use there and then, one of the things I like about Rivals is the ability to pitch cards to mend. So even a redundant card can do something for you. Destroy the Plans, it's superb in forcing your opponent to discard 3 cards. In one-on-one, you're obviously drastically reducing their options. In multiplayer games, I will often maybe use that to trigger the person who is trying to knock me out of the game to reduce their attack options. Now, this costs 3, 3, 3. This one costs 4. Again, I found 4 is too expensive for this. So all tied up only costs 2 prestige, and it's going to exhaust your opponent's vampires. So this does a couple of things. At being only 2 cost, it means it's a relatively easy one to play. That means you're going to be able to trigger your agenda easily. And it also means you're going to be getting prestige back off the agenda, and if you've got Velvet, it's going to pay for itself. The other thing you can do is exhaust out your opponent's characters, which means if you have a brutal attack up your sleeve, you can then basically pick the target of your choice. And we'll come back to brutal attacks in a minute. Now, the real star for me is Whispering Champion. I've said it a couple of times. I do a prestige drain deck with the Malkavians. Being able to steal 2 from a target of 4 is really powerful. So yeah, it's 4. It's got a lot of costs on it. But I'm getting 2 of those back off my opponent. Potentially 1 off Velvet and 1 off the agenda. So straight away there, it can cover itself. And actually losing 2 prestige like that is quite a powerful effect. So there are a couple of ways you can boost your conspiracies in-game. Boost the prestige that's on them. So let's have a look at a couple of those. So you can see you've got a couple of cards in front of us. First up, everything is connected. It must be for Malkavian. It's got Governor in as the artwork. One of the things I really like about the artwork is the characters going through it. Now this has the advantage with everything connected of obviously putting more on. So a conspiracy, you can put 1 prestige on a turn. Obviously this can put another 1 on. So there's times when I've used this, when I've only had 1 conspiracy out, if that's been 1 beneath or 2 beneath it, I've been able to bump it up with everything is connected and trigger it, especially when it's a Whispering Campaign. Now obviously it's best to do it when you have as many out as possible. So I'd be looking at playing this turn 2, turn 3 if I've got 2 or 3 conspiracies out, and getting those 3 extra or extra prestige on it's really good, really powerful. Now the next up, Faulty Logic. I just love the art. It's for me, it looks quite Malkavian. It's cool, and I found Faulty Logic to be pretty amazing. It's consistently closed out a lot of my games when I have been focusing on prestige draining. So, and actually, it doesn't even matter about social attack. It's the text box. Your 4 contributes 1 prestige to a face-down card of your choosing. If you resolve that card this turn, you can target that 4. There you have it. It's drained from them, so I'm going to take 1 off them, hopefully to trigger a Whispering Campaign. And so that's going to be a 3 drain on my opponent straight away, which is quite powerful. And the other thing about this coming back, so imagine I've drained 1 off there to put on there, I've gained 2 back, then I've got 1 off that. So it's going to help build up my prestige as well for free. And I am going to come talk a bit more in detail about the prestige drain, but there are other ways to drain your prestige. So you can imagine that's 1 action. This doesn't take an action to trigger, and then I've got another action to drain out that prestige. Now I have spoken about conspiracies, and I'd like to leave you a couple of things to consider with conspiracies. Is number 1, it takes setup and actions. So whilst you're setting up your conspiracies, what are your opponents able to start doing? There will be times when you are having to make some real decisions about the actions you're going to take. If there's mortals on the board you want to deal with or interfere, or things you need to do, you have to start making those critical decisions about, am I playing my conspiracies or doing other things? Secondly, they are costly, and you may end up with a lot of resources tied up in them. And what haven? So I found before the FAQ on it, the Madhouse was too costly. Exhaust your leader and discard a card. However, now the exhaust your leader section's gone, discard a card, I'm starting to look at the Madhouse as a way to boost those conspiracies. Straight away, I should have been talking about this, but a way to boost conspiracies. Before that, when it was exhaust your leader, I was using the University Library card draw. Card draw is always king, in my opinion. If in doubt, card draw it out. I have been running 12 conspiracies in the deck. However, I've changed things up a bit so I can interact with mortals a bit more, which meant I had some more social attacks into it. So at the moment, I'm edging on 10, but you do need to see those conspiracies early on of a pretty good draw engine. Another reason why I had the University Library. So once it gets past the need to put conspiracies down, so once you've got your 2-3 conspiracies down and you're starting to hit your opponent's prestige, again, having those extra conspiracies in your hand, you can always toss them for mending actions. Again, I said I really like that. So what else can a Clan Malkavian deck do? It's really interesting that the Clan Malkavian has one of the most brutal attacks in the game. Let me talk about the humble inmate number 745943. So he's got 2 physical. And as an attacker, you can play a prestige to give it 2 damage to the target. So that's up to 4. Then, if you pull out a holdout dagger, you're gaining extra damage for every obfuscate. And obfuscate is a Clan Malkavian power. So we're at 4. He does himself 5 with that attack. Imagine if you've got somebody like Bad Penny out in your party. Suddenly, that humble Malkavian inmate is doing 7 damage on the attack. And there's not a lot of people, vampires, can take a 7 strength attack. Another one of the things I found really useful in the Malkavian deck is the Good Doctor. Again, you've got obfuscate, but it's that ability to mend damage on your characters. This means that when I was using the library, when it was coming around, I was able to start mending the blood loss that the governor was using on the library. If there's 1 or 2 SAD out, I can ping those SAD as well, not have to worry about the actions to deal with SAD, leave that for another person, and have the doc healing SAD damage. With SAD damage, it'd be also worth pointing out that the Malkavians do have a distraction card. Action ongoing, discard this card, redirect up to 2 second Inquisition damage you take during your turn. And pop that onto target 4. What I've found with this is it's the action slot. It's really difficult to slip in, so I've tended not to use it. If it could be, I know there's no framework for this in the game at the moment, but if that could be a card I could just play when I take damage from the second Inquisition, that would be really good. But it's not, so if wishes were fishes. So what else can a Clan Malkavian do? So defense, defense, defense. So your actions, as I said before, you're going to be going out, you're doing stuff. I found myself kind of doing the occasional crazy attack against an opponent's vampire, picking off the mortals I need, playing conspiracies. So an opponent that's going to attack you, you've got one of the best defense cards in the game off the bat, pretty much good against anything, 3 against mental attacks, +2 shields against social and physical. And Cloak of Shadows, again, if you've got a lot of obfuscate in your party, that can pull out a load of shields as well against physical and ranged attacks. So yeah, I'm also always looking at a bit of good defense, but physical shields isn't the only defense the Malkavians have. What I do think of when I get defense is if I can reduce my opponent's options, that is really good defense as well. So the Malkavians have, well, anybody has, but the Malkavians, especially if you're running conspiracies, have quite a good discard, forcing your opponent to discard package. And this is what we'll look at. So the shakedown, obviously getting rid of attacks. You know, if you want your Malkavians to be defended, get rid of your opponent's attacks before they've even thought of them. That's quite a Malkavian way to do it. Fragmented Mind. Dominate is one of the Malkavian clan disciplines. But I'm going to talk a wee bit about Dominate later on and the clan Malkavians. But that is discarding cards for each dominate you've got in the party. Destroy the plans. Conspiracy we already talked about, forces your opponent to discard 3 cards. And cards like Masquerade, which gives you secrecy, and this is outside your haven, gives you secrecy. This is pretty good because it's forcing your opponent to discard cards for intel. So you can imagine, you know, getting a good shakedown to remove your opponent's attacks, and then when they do want to attack, having to discard extra cards for the Masquerade. And I know you can draw up to 4 cards a turn before you look at any other powers for draw, but that's all your actions take, and plus your 2 at the end. So a good hand attack can really protect your characters. Now, another thing to think about is my preferred way of ending games is to drain my opponent's prestige. And 2 of these cards we've already seen. And the third one is a mental attack. So Malkavian's good with mental powers, dominates Malkavian power. If this party is 2+ dominate, your foe loses 2 prestige. So the amount of games that I've won has been something like this triggering this for 3 drain on my opponent with a demand obedience. So there's very few people by the time you get to mid game would have 5 or less prestige, you know, hits. It's quite a palpable hit, and that is the core of my deck. Now, there's a couple of things to think about. This is to get this off. There's a shortage of dominate in the clan Malkavian. The lower vampires of clan Malkavian don't really have dominate. So one of the things I have been doing is thrown this little Ventrue in, so that I do have a second 3-cost dominate to support Lolita. So these 2 with the governor generally gives me the dominate on the field that I need to kick off demand obedience. But there have been times when I've been sat waiting to get a vampire with that dominate out to support the governor. With that in mind, I've recently been looking at replacing Humberto with Darius Wolf. Again, clan Tremere, so he's got dominating Auspex, and the character can block. When it blocks an attack, drawn cards. Again, I was saying earlier that I love card draw, and card draw being king, so that fits into the sort of stuff that I like my decks doing. The other thing that having the Tremere in my deck does is gives me access to another prestige drain card. Innovate. Steal 1 prestige from target foe and put it on the acting character as mend. So yes, I think Darius will be doing more work for me than Humberto. Now, there's a few other things the Malkavians can do. So let's see what else they can do. Shadows and Shrouds have just pulled out a really nice package of Auspex effects. So search engine, exhaust, and you can look at the top card of your library or faction deck, leave it or move it to the bottom of your deck. It's pretty useful, all times know what's coming. However, what we have is Clairvoyance. Look at target foe's hands, choose one of the library cards there, place it on top of their library, then gain an unhosted action. Spirit's Touch. Reveal the top card of a target player's library, gain prestige equal to its BP. If no prestige is gained this way, discard the reveal card and ready the acting vampire. A mental block. Your foes may not play cards with the same name as card attached to this. Exhaust it. detach a card and attach a top card of four's library. So straight away there, you've got some really interesting things to do with looking at card hands, looking at tops of the library and gaining some effects from it. This I've managed to kick off a couple of times and get 5 or 4 prestige from it, which certainly has kept my vampires in the game. Clairvoyance I've used to stick stuff like Apex Predator or Mental Block. And search engine potentially, I mean I generally do like a search engine in most of my decks, but with a search engine I've been used once to then Spirit's Touch. It's quite a nice wee package. It's currently not in my decks, but I have used it. It's quite enjoyable to use. It's certainly maybe something I'd use in friendly games more than I would in a tournament setting, but the option's always there. Another thing I'm currently looking at is a bit of Nosferatu support for multiplayer tournaments. So this is obvious Nosferatu to jump in and help. Low cost, bit of physical, which you don't have, bit of obfuscate, well, bit of physical that Malkavians generally don't have, bit of obfuscate, and there is, mine's gone quickly blank, Clandestine, which also fits quite well into a Malkavian deck, allowing you to hit mortals, and again giving you the 2 obfuscate. Having a bit of Nosferatu in gives you access to Bad Reflection, which means if you're going to get attacked, it's going to cost the enemy dearly to attack you. But what I do really like is if I'm running a prestige drain deck in a multiplayer game, just having access to 1 or 2 spy games means that if somebody's looking particularly low on the prestige and perilous, I can flip their rival token to me and knock them out with my previous prestige drain package. So that's another option I'm looking at as allies to my Malkavians. And finally, let's look at a couple of Malkavian cards that's available. So Faulty Logic we've talked about. Unhinged, I'm not really running a kick you in the face Malkavian deck. I don't tend to use Unhinged. All Tied Up, really like it. Conspiracy card, cheap conspiracy card so I can get my engine running on my conspiracy, and when I really want to deliver a big attack against somebody targeted, that can tap out my opponents. Insanity Defense I mentioned, and finally let's talk about this card. Dumpster Dive. Put a card from your discard pile into your hand. If your country is 2+ all specs, draw a card. So how I'm looking at this, apart from the fact I can recur my big prestige hits, Demand Obedience for example, or get my opponent to pull prestige onto my conspiracies, if I am having allies and I am going to have, say, a card like Spy Games or the Tremere and Venerate, what I'll be able to do is, if I don't have Nosferatu or a Tremere on the table at the time, toss them early in the game for mend effects or intel, knowing that I do have a fleet of dumpster dives, being able to pull them back into my hand when I need them. So there we have it. Clan Malkavian. Really fun to play. Loads of things you can do. You can get a bit mad with it. Nobody quite knows what your game plan is because there's quite a bit of game plan stuff there. And ultimately, if you play Malkavian, embrace the madness, have a little fun. Anyway, that's my thoughts about Clan Malkavian. If you've got any questions about any of it, give me a shout. That's how I generally play them. The things that interest me about Clan Malkavian. If you disagree with anything I've said, give us a shout. If you want to chat about anything yourself, put some comments in the sections, and I look forward to chatting to you again. So that's goodbye for now. Goodbye.